high-level overview. In this energetic and wide-ranging conversation, Foster and Konstantin Kisin from TRIGGERnometry join Joe Rogan to discuss the absurdities of modern society, political corruption, cultural polarization, and the dangers of unchecked government power. The discussion swings between hilarious personal anecdotes, sharp social commentary, philosophical reflections, and warnings about the future of AI, surveillance, and civil liberties. This is a conversation that effortlessly moves between storytelling, social critique, humor, and serious warnings about freedom, corruption, and human nature. This is a summary of 2297, Foster and Konstantin Kisin from the Joe Rogan Experience, where we break down the key insights, ideas, and takeaways from this content, giving you the gist so you can decide if you want the rest. The full summary is available on perfectsummary.com, and you can listen to the podcast Perfect Summary on all major platforms or watch it on YouTube at Official Perfect Summary. The discussion explores how modern life increasingly feels fake and absurd, like living inside a simulation, the dangers of concentrated political power and the corruption that follows, how both left and right political extremes lead to loss of freedom, why AI development could lead to a dystopian future if unchecked, the importance of humility, resilience, and responsibility in preserving human freedom. The simulation hypothesis and modern absurdities. The guests open by discussing how bizarre and preposterous modern life has become, joking that it's evidence we might be living in a simulation. They cite real-life absurdities, such as a comedian collapsing while joking about vaccines, as moments that feel scripted and unreal. Francis and Konstantin highlight how political figures now seem like characters from sitcoms, feeding a feeling of unreality. Political power, corruption, and human nature. A major thread through the conversation is the recognition that power inevitably corrupts. They discuss how both left-wing and right-wing governments, if unchecked, devolve into authoritarianism. Referencing history and literature like Lord of the Rings, they argue that power attracts those least suited to wield it responsibly. They emphasize the importance of limiting government power regardless of which party is in charge. Cultural division and manufactured outrage. Joe and the guests critique the tribalism and outrage culture that dominate public discourse. They highlight how social media encourages addictive outrage behaviors and creates echo chambers where nuanced discussion is impossible. They also discuss how controlled opposition and paid protesters create false narratives of popular support or outrage to manipulate public opinion. The rise of AI and the threat to humanity. Joe expresses serious concerns about the rise of AI, warning that machines are already displaying primitive survival instincts and could soon become uncontrollable. The conversation covers potential dystopian outcomes where AI monitors and controls human life, replacing human judgment with cold algorithmic decisions. The trio jokes darkly about a future ruled by unchallengeable robot enforcers. Immigration, law enforcement, and moral complexity. They acknowledge the real issues posed by illegal immigration, especially when criminal elements infiltrate along with vulnerable migrants. However, they stress the importance of due process, recounting heartbreaking stories like the deportation of a gay Venezuelan barber wrongly accused of gang affiliation. They argue that compassion, combined with rational enforcement, must guide immigration policy, education, opportunity, and breaking cycles of poverty. The conversation touches on how broken education systems trap disadvantaged youth. They argue that instead of endlessly academic paths, trades and tangible skills should be taught to help kids find purpose and self-worth. Without alternative paths, young people often turn to gangs, leading to cycles of violence and poverty. Surveillance, freedom, and the dangers of compliance. Joe and his guests warn that mass surveillance and data collection, often sold to the public under the banner of safety, are deeply dangerous. They discuss historical examples where government databases were weaponized against vulnerable populations, warning that handing over too much information and power to governments is a recipe for future oppression. Hope, responsibility, and the way forward. Despite the many challenges discussed, the tone remains ultimately hopeful. They stress that while corruption and stupidity are inevitable, individuals still have the power to think critically, resist propaganda, and build better communities. Responsibility, resilience, and humility are positioned as essential virtues for maintaining freedom and sanity in chaotic times. That's a wrap on 2297 Francis Foster and Konstantin Kisin. The conversation serves as a funny, sharp, and sobering reminder that protecting freedom requires vigilance, humility, and a willingness to stand up for common sense in a world increasingly driven by madness. This summary came from perfectsummary.com, your go-to for podcast recaps, book breakdowns, and video summaries that give you the gist so you can decide if you want the rest. You can listen to the Perfect Summary podcast on all major platforms or watch our content on YouTube at Official Perfect Summary.